Hey, listener, if you're heading into a new development and thinking, let's just pick a name and knock out a logo real quick, I encourage you to pause and take a step back. That decision will shape everything: how your building is perceived, how fast it leases, and how much momentum you actually build before you open the doors. At Authentic, we partner with Charlesgate to create brands that set up developers, owners, and investors for maximized ROI. We drive market momentum for boutique multifamily and believe deeply in inspiration derived from bespoke hospitality, prospect nurturing, market savvy decisions, meaningful brand experiences, and more. If you want to build something that stands out and sells out, schedule a chat with Mike and me. Link in the comments below. On this episode, Mike and I discuss the importance of branding and the need for differentiation in today's market. We chat about a common misconception surrounding the definition of a logo and a brand, and why aligning a brand with an architectural design and the overall experience of a property helps create a compelling narrative. We then wrap up with key takeaways for listeners to implement in their own branding strategies. Let's jump in. All right, we're back at it. Real Wins, another episode with the dynamic duo, or the two musketeers. I'm not sure how we're going to think about that these days, but welcome back to another episode of Real Wins. Mike, glad to see you.
I don't know if that was a hell of an effort at self-promotion or like deprecating humor. I don't know what the hell the two musketeers, Chris. Jesus,
it's a little of both. I like a little of both. You got to balance it out, right?
Nice. Yeah, it's been a minute, man. I'm glad to dive back in here.
It has been a minute. Yeah. How's things? I know that you just got back from a little trip with the family. What's new?
Yeah, man. Just got back from a little bit of sailing in the Caribbean, which is always nice. The kids have a blast. They discovered a few new sea creatures, which is nice. I am one that has to chase the sunshine during the winter because it's depressing with not enough sun. So yeah, all good. It was a good trip. Kids had a great family experience. So we enjoyed
awesome.
it. Back
That's
in the
great.
saddle here though now.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, same. We got back from our little trip into I guess the great unknown with two little ones. We've never done a family vacation with our 4-year-old and our then 6-month-old. We went to Florida. We had a fun time at the beach and avoided some man-o-war sea creatures ourselves, so no one got stung. We
Nice.
got out of there unscathed, and but the kids loved it, and I think we've kind of started to figure out how to do this with two little ones that have very specific needs at this point.
Oh man, there's only one way to do it, and that's basically just to do it, right? So
Yeah.
it's like that's the only option you have with kids.
Yeah,
Good for
that's
you.
right.
Great.
Well, all right, let's jump into this episode. I like talking about this stuff. I think you have a fun time too. Today we're going to talk about sort of this idea of generic branding or generic logos, why that potentially hurts a property long term, certainly short term. We can talk about that, but long term as well. You know, a lot of branding out there, we joke about this, we post about it, feels the same. It's kind of this sea of sameness where everything is forgettable. We have a few notes in front of us. We kind of were joking about like trees and sunshine and vague nature motifs and like vistas and oak trees and stuff like that. You know, developers and owners are spending a lot of money. They're investing a lot of money in these things. And the cringe point for me is that there's just not a lot of differentiation in the local market, certainly not against competition. So we're going to dive into that today. At the end of the episode, what I want our listeners to walk away from are a few different tactical ways to rethink this strategy going into it next time. Maybe you've made this mistake in the past. All right, take a deep breath. Let's do it differently next time. So I want to just kind of jump in, throw something to you, Mike, to get us started. But let's talk about just the root issue here, the reason why we see this over and over again. What do you think that comes from?
Well, look, I think the primary thing, and you used a word a minute ago, differentiation, and I think fundamentally most people, and this is just developers and there's people who are not marketers or branders, most people don't understand that marketing and branding is really fundamentally about differentiation. And if you're not differentiating, if you're not creating unique value, you don't there's not a way to maximize whatever product or service you're delivering to the market. And so I think there's just that fundamental misunderstanding of what a brand is, what a logo is not a brand. For example, it's not just about putting as you said, a tree or a vista in a nice little word mark and calling it a brand. There's just frankly, it's just a lack of understanding of how powerful true branding and differentiation actually can be.
Let's talk about that real quick, just as a tangent. So this comes up a lot in conversations that we have, but the difference between a logo and a brand, and I want to kind of plant a flag in this because I think it's important. You don't just go out and get a brand. You can go out and pay someone $100 and get a logo, but a logo is a part of a brand identity. It's one very small piece of a completed cohesive brand identity. A logo is call it a unit of measurement or a piece of a larger thing. And it's not a brand identity that's going to carry your property through thick and thin long term. It's certainly not something that you can then rely on and sort of work off of and build materials from. So in your experience, Mike, are you seeing developers or owners really get into this mindset of, oh, I just need to go get a logo and then I'm good? Like, is there a fundamental misunderstanding about what brand is in the real estate industry?
Totally. I mean, look, it's an easy trap to fall into because that sort of logo is always the first thing at the forefront. Oh, I need a logo, or I need a name, and it's like it just comes from the misunderstanding. And I think it was, if I remember correctly, Marty Neumeier who used the phrase, a brand is not what you say or what you show; it's what they say and what they feel about you, which means the customer, right? And so it's all about this entire holistic feeling and essence and messaging, and the logo being a part of that. The colors and messaging and frankly the even from we'll talk about this later in the conversation, I'm sure, but tying it all together with like leasing and management, the experience that is provided is what creates a brand. And there's a misunderstanding about that in a pretty widespread way, in my opinion. And and I get it. Like it sort of needs a lot of strategic thought. It needs an investment to build a brand. But I know, and you can speak to this more than I can, being coming directly from the branding and creative side more so than I am. I see the impact of what brands can do in the market to the customers, to the prospective residents. You're the one out there kind of creating amazing brands and helping to build that whole holistic brand experience. But yeah, there's just a fundamental misunderstanding. And what I try to do is tell people that let's take a step back and understand, like, if you look at a big brand that everyone knows, like Nike or Apple, it's not just about the apple on the back of the computer, the Apple symbol. It's not just about the swoosh symbol, right? It's about how they convey their brand, what their brand archetype is, how their messaging all is related, all of the things that come into how their ads are created, what the messaging looks like, and and how their products are created. All these things really are what creates the brand. It's not just about having a swoosh or an apple with a bite out of it.
Yeah. That's exactly right. When we start to dive into brand playbooks, we start with, very, very first thing, the tip of the iceberg is who, what is the market? Who is the audience? Who are we talking to? What are the other competitors in the market? Digging into that information and really understanding what's going on out there, because it's one thing to do that research, figure out what's going on, spend time in due diligence versus just saying, 123 Main Street, let's buy a logo for it and let's run with it. That's not going to create any differentiation. Secondly, naming with intention is so critical. And you were touching on this idea that, you can just kind of pick a name, run with it, do a logo, boom, you're done. A brand is really a reflection of sort of this essence of the overall experience at your property. So you can go through these motions and you can name it, Oak Vistas or whatever it is. But people that come to the property are going to, assume and sort of have their own ideas of what the property is, what it feels like, what that kind of walkthrough is when they go on a tour with the leasing team. You have the ability to kind of control that narrative to a point. But I think it's really important that you have to name with intention and think through the naming exercise. Before I move forward with some of these other sort of best practices, I just want to pause there and say, what is it with generic trees and the views in real estate? I really want to know. Is it just because we're talking about land and there's like a view because it's just associated with land or hills? Like, can we
Yes.
dig into that for a
I
second? What is
mean,
that?
yeah, I think we all just in our basest human moments, we all just pull back to cliche. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
like
I think so.
it's like I
I
don't
think
know.
so.
We want to avoid people feeling like they're trapped inside a large building and can feel nature and the outdoor. I have no idea, man. It's
Yeah,
it's a good it's
yeah,
a good question though.
yeah. Oh man. Okay, so let me hit a couple other ways that we solve this. So, like I said, understanding the market and audience, huge. Naming with intention, huge. Thinking about positioning and messaging within that market and to that audience is super important. When we dive into a brand playbook, we're thinking about, beyond the design, beyond the creative, what's going to actually resonate with this audience from a content perspective, from a messaging perspective. How are we differentiating ourselves, not only visually, but with language against the competitors? And then when we actually dive into the identity, we're not just doing a logo. We're designing a full suite. It's a full brand identity suite that rolls out into a lot of different things. I post about this a lot on LinkedIn. And then finally, we're testing this, we're refining it, we're putting it in front of our customers. We're saying, hey, does this feel right? Based on everything we've been building off of, it's kind of a waterfall effect. We're building a foundation and then we're refining it from there. And what we see, I think, as a big issue, Mike, is that we have so many phone conversations where customers are incoming and they say, yeah, here's this PDF. I got a logo done. Can we use this? And then that opens up sort of this big can of worms about what actually needs to be adjusted because it's not actually a brand yet.
Yeah, I mean, can you? I'd love to hear from you. Actually, maybe can you illustrate what sort of the components of a brand identity might be, and how that how do you think about developing that from where does it come from? I guess, like, if you, in the best case scenario, like how would you start to think about really building a differentiated brand identity, so to speak?
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic, delivering premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Authentic's proven approach accelerates leasing velocity, boosts rental rates, and increases long-term value. You can find out more at authenticff.com. And by Charlesgate, the multifamily investor's secret weapon to help underwrite, go to market, and operate projects that generate market-beating returns. With an adaptive staffing model and on-demand leasing teams, Charlesgate empowers a better resident experience at an efficient cost structure for today's owners. Visit charlesgate.com for more. Yeah, for us, it's like I said, it's very much starting with a high level of what's going on in the market. So we'll take a step back. What are the competitors, or at least the perceived competitors, which, as a side note, that's been an interesting sort of exercise in recent years where our customers will come to us with 2 or 3 competitors, but then CoStar will show us 5 other competitors that are maybe equally as competitive in the market out on a chart. Hey, are these more modern? Are these more traditional? Are these speaking to more high end, renters? What does that look like? And then we kind of take a step back and have some conversation with our development or owner partners and say, where do you want to fall in this spectrum? Here are our assumptions. Let's think about this. And then we kind of back into the naming exercise with that high level information around the market, the audience, what are the renters that we're trying to target, and really start there. That's the baseline. When we're actually putting together the brand identity elements themselves, we're thinking about everything from market positioning. We're thinking about the brand identity beyond the logo. How can this play in collateral? How can this be activated in a digital sense? What about on the website? What about in material that renters are going to be walking away from? So we really think about it. It's sort of like a 4D chess thing for us, where, again, we have a foundation, we build on it from there, and then we're really building out this full brand identity suite that aligns with the goals and the mission of the property.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. I think what the phrase that I've used, and I think we've used collectively, is building a brand that matters, and like something that actually resonates and differentiates to prospective residents, but not just to any residents, right? So it's to the target audience that you expect and think and are expecting to live and want to live in this location, building, architecture, style, price points, whatever it might be. And there's another interesting quote that I love to repeat, and I think it was pretty sure it's Brian Chesky, the Airbnb CEO, who talked about, what you really want to be doing is build a brand that 100 people really effing love, and not something that 1,000 people just kind of like. And that really speaks to this idea of, coring, deep into who your audience is, and how to create a brand identity with all those factors you just mentioned that resonates with them, that attracts them, that drives them, that compels them to, want to see this property and want to live in this property and want to experience this property. And when you can do that and make that work, it really creates a faster leasing process, a better experience from a resident perspective, and all these factors that ultimately drive NOI, which is all. This is not about, painting a pretty picture. It's about driving NOI at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah, I was just going to go there. This is a business at the end of the day, and what we're doing with this approach is we are building a business asset to strengthen the business that is the property, to make more money, to stay stabilized long term, and to build an experience around what it is to be in that building as a renter. If you're going to go into 5 buildings, one of those buildings is going to feel different. It's going to reflect differently to your core. And there's a reason why that is. That's not an accident. The reason why you walk away from that building feel a certain way is likely that it was designed that way, and you are the target for that building. It's not a mistake, right? There's a reason why we feel connected to certain buildings when we walk in and when we think back on them. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. And one other thing to add there, and I think the magic can really happen. And from our experience, when we've worked on projects that have branding tied in with the building design in a tight way, with the architectural style and the architectural language and the brand language are all speaking the same sort of, tone of voice, the same way, that really tends to resonate best. And so having marketing branding in early even with the architectural design process can really make a brand and brand experience sort of create some magic with residents. And, there's a few examples I can think of that we've worked on that have done that. And, there was a building I can remember that was a English Jacobean architectural style. And this brand was created around it being, called the Lancaster, and it's an English plane in World War II. And we talked about the finished packages as the Churchill and the Winston. I forget exactly. It was a number of years ago, but all of the sort of core messaging stem from this idea of the architectural stylings of the buildings, which was really unique in the market. It was, it delivered such a sort of resident experience for so many of the residents that it really created a compelling financial outcome. And a large part was because of how this brand was created, but it was so associated and tied in and flowed from the architecture, from the vision of the project, from the developer vision, architectural vision. And it just tied in so nicely together that really magic can happen. So I don't know if you feel the same way about how it is to create a brand and be able to have that opportunity to get in early on those branding exercises.
Yeah, 100%. I would say more often than not, we are requesting to have at least a seat at the table when we're talking about architectural design decisions, interior decisions. If we're not in scope to work on those elements of a project, it's absolutely helpful to have a conversation with the interior design team, with the architecture team, and to at least have collaboration and back and forth in those conversations, because it really does matter, and it gives you early insight into how the building is going to come together as a whole. And that way you can also have that in mind as you're thinking about the brand identity. One of the things that comes to mind for me right now is actually I had a conversation with someone, a newcomer to the industry, works in the student housing sort of sector of the space as a designer, as a creative. And one of the things we talked about is that there's so much option out there today. No matter where you go, it could be a small city, big city. There's tons of options, even in the student housing sector. And so we talked about what it is that you need to do to separate yourself from the others. And so one of the things he was struggling with is that he felt like at their company, they kind of continue to do the same thing over and over, the same packages, the same type of naming, the same architecture, just kind of blends in and looks the same. And what I was describing to him was a project that we've been working on called Charm. And we don't do a ton of student housing, but we certainly have, I would say, 1 or 2 student housing projects going on at a time. Charm is a fun one because as I went through this with them, this is actually near Georgia Southern University. We went through this together. I shared my screen. I was going through some things that we had done for Charm. And one of the big things I told them was, students these days, they want to feel connected to something. They want to have a cool experience. They want to be excited about these places they're living. When I went to school, it was like the same brown buildings and, on campus housing or whatever else. There was nothing cool about it. You just kind of like tried to pick the one that fit your budget and then got what you got kind of thing. And, in today's world, students have options and they want to feel connected. And so Charm is bold, beautiful, bright colors. We're using language that connects with them. We're not saying luxury student housing, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. We're not doing that. We're really pushing for something different. We did custom video and photo shoots, and we really made this thing feel different because at the end of the day, it is different. And we had over 600 pre-leasing leads. We had 15-20% email click-through campaign rates.
Wow.
It's been a great result. And I think a lot of that is because it is so different. We activated it early. And again, if students have 5-10 options, they're going to gravitate towards the one that they feel most connected to and that feels like it's speaking to them.
Yeah. And that, I mean, look, and that's, if you talk about, making an investment that drives a return on that investment, this is how you do it, right? This is the thing. It's like, this is about creating, alpha, right? From an investment standpoint, creating alpha, not just like being the market, but actually driving differentiated value and driving better performance into the market. And that's one of those things one of those things that we say, or certainly that I say, and I think we say as a team a lot, is you're not just building a building to build it. You're building it to lease it to drive an investment return. And if you're not thinking about how you're going to market, which means branding, marketing, strategy overall, and how you're taking it to market, what are you doing, right? But it's oftentimes, and too oftentimes, an afterthought, or marketing is the afterthought. And it's like, well, you can just sit here and build a building and hope people are going to show up when you open it, and it's going to be a slow lease up, less desirable occupancy, not as good of an experience, and you might achieve just what the market gives you, maybe, and but you're still running a high level of risk because you're just you're relying on generic market conditions, and hopefully the market's decent and supply demand equations not upside down when it hits the market. But if you actually develop a serious go-to-market strategy, starting with what we're talking about today, a brand that matters and a brand that resonates and a brand that's differentiated, you can drive value over and above what the market's giving you. And that's the true power of making these investments to reduce your risk and increase your upside in a really powerful way. And we've seen it, and I know you've seen it, and we've seen it time and time again, that works extremely well.
Yes. Let's hit some takeaways. So we got three takeaways here that we jotted down for listeners if you want to approach this differently moving forward. Number one has to do with the name. So naming with a purpose, not a preference. And Tori helped us put these notes together. I really like that turn of phrase where you can prefer to say Oak Vista. You can prefer to say College Flats on University Ave, or whatever the most generic thing is in the world. But you really need to have intention when you're thinking about naming, because at the end of the day, naming is tied to positioning. It's going to be tied to your messaging, and it's going to be tied to the audience that you're drawing in. I really liked what you said.
Just to put a point, sorry to interrupt, just to put a point, it needs to be tied to the audience. I think too often the trap that I've seen is like, quote unquote, I don't like that name, or someone on the team doesn't like that name, or those colors, or that brand. It's like, well, are you the target audience? Because if you're not, it doesn't matter. We have to gear this to the target audience to make it work as well as it can.
Exactly. It goes back to what you said with, 100 true fans or 200 true fans versus 2,000 people that kind of think, it's an option.
Yeah, it's not offensive.
You want to have exactly. You want to have the people come to you that are excited about that. So that's number one. Number two, this differentiation between logo and brand. And let's plant a flag in this. A logo is not a brand. Brand is made up of many different pieces of the puzzle. A brand identity, or a brand identity as a whole, we think of it as a leash driver. It's a way to push NOI. It's a business decision that you are investing in, and it's a business asset long term. It communicates certain things, it makes you feel certain things. That is not what a logo does. A logo is just a small piece of a larger package.
Yeah, exactly. And we touched on that a lot of the conversation, but without a doubt, you've got to come in with an understanding that this is about what you're doing to differentiate and how you make it making people feel, not just a logo or a symbol on a folder.
Yes. All right, number 3, last one. The brand should be doing work for you. And I think this is one that's often missed. We have so many phone calls where developers or owners reach out and they say, we're opening in 1 month. We've been open for 2 months. We've been open for 4 months. Our leasing's going so slow. What's going on? We believe that great branding moves markets, and we believe that great branding can bring people in at an organic level for months and months before you even open, so that you have pre-leasing momentum even before the doors are opening. This is on-site activation. This is nurturing renters. This is early opportunity to create velocity so that when you actually add fuel to the fire in the form of paid campaigns and so forth, you are just piling on and giving the leasing team great things to work with rather than forcing them to start flat-footed.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I can give you an example because it's so important to align the leasing team with the branding and marketing. And so I was just talking about this with someone on my team the other day, like a neat idea we were just working on implementing right now, saying, hey, when developers and owners go into these projects, they tend to have a vision. There's an architectural vision. There's a brand created if you do it well. Why not have something where you're like, hey, let's create a letter from the developer to future residents type of things that you take. What's the story of the building, the architecture, the brand? And so after people come in for a tour, you say, hey, the follow-up is then, hey, great to meet you yesterday, Tom. Really so happy that the amenity spaces resonated with you. By the way, I was just talking to the developer, and really, I think we noticed that some of the things that they really care about resonated with you. Here's a letter that the developer wrote to talk about their vision and their story and the brand and why the experience we're trying to create is so important. And we just want to give that to you. The developer wants to know he really cares, or she really cares, and about the experience. And that's why we put so much thoughtful care into the brand and into the design of the building. And we really would love to welcome you as a future resident. And this is like a nice hospitality touch that extends the brand as a follow-up piece. That's just, again, building that brand experience.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's great. Ideas like that outside of the box, again, are just going to differentiate your property from the sea of sameness, which we see everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's the reason why leasing is lacking performance on a lot of these buildings. You have to separate yourself, and it starts with the brand.
No doubt. So hopefully some good takeaways there, Chris. Some good thoughts.
Yeah.
I always love chatting with you about branding and creative work. It's not my mode of operation. Usually, I have a passion for it because it actually drives return investment. But I couldn't draw a stick figure to save my life. So I'm just glad we work with you to do that type of stuff.
Well, thanks for hopping on this one. This was a fun one. Appreciate your time, and let's do this again.
Awesome. See you, Chris.